Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for joining us today for this advanced Roll20 panel. We're getting to nerd out about my favorite topic, which is power user tools for Roll20. So all of us here probably came into Roll20 as power users. I know that's how I got basically the job working for Roll20. Is I was one of their biggest power users and Roll20 fanboys. So I'm really looking forward to going over some of the tools that I think are incredibly useful, but most people might not actually know about, because the core part of the virtual tabletop, the map layers, the draw tools, even the initiative tracker and the chat pane, chat and dice rolling, those are all really the core tools of the game. They're your hammers and your screwdrivers. And today we're going to talk about your laser levels and your stud finders and your putty knives. So why don't we take a quick minute to make sure you all know who we are. I'm Steve K. I'm one of the developers for Roll20. This is my colleague Phil. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm one of the three developers for Roll20. If something has ever broken and you went on the forums, you probably talked to me.
Phil's going to be doing our driving today, showing you all the wonderful things that we're going to be talking about. And we're also joined by a face that probably most of you recognize if you're on the forums frequently, our moderator, the Aaron.
Hello.
So one of the tools that we probably get the most questions about is the looking for group tool, finding a group. And it's the gateway to playing anything on Roll20. And there seems to be some confusions about it, some frustrations about it. So we wanted to clear up some of the finer points today. First of all, it's actually pretty easy from the GM's point of view to get a LFG listed out publicly, and it's available from the game details page of any one of your games. All you have to do is click on a button to list it publicly. But a problem that a lot of people seem to have is they don't understand why their listing doesn't go public. And some of the big pitfalls that happen there are Roll20 expects you to have certain information listed in order to keep the list of active games that are looking for players healthy. Like, we want to make sure that you have the proper number of players set. Like, my game needs 6 players, and that number count also includes the GM himself. And if that number isn't set, your listing isn't actually going to go live. There will be a little box in the upper left-hand corner that will tell you why it isn't. Another pitfall is that you don't have a game scheduled that's coming up. And sometimes, even if you don't have a date set or you're not sure of the night, you still need to set a potential date inside the next 3 months where you might play as a placeholder, even before you can start advertising. And are there any others that I'm not thinking of, Aaron?
Yeah, honestly, I have never used looking for group.
I love the LFG tool. I used it a ton before I started working at Roll20, and since then, I've created a under-the-table account that is not connected to my Roll20 dev and anonymously played in dozens, maybe as many as 30 games in the last couple of years with maybe some of you, and you don't know it. So I love the tool. I think it's great. I think you guys should use it too. So the other piece that most people have trouble with is, and this is probably the one I hear the most, is nobody's inviting me to their games. Like, they'll put a post out there. They'll go look through the LFG. They'll find a game that they like. They'll put on a forum post saying, "I want to join your game," and they don't get picked. Because the sad truth is that there are way more players than there are GMs. So the games tend to fill up quickly. There's a supply and demand. So if you really want to make sure you're part of a game, consider running a game. You're going to have players. Your game's going to fill up quickly. But I want to take a few minutes to talk about what it's like and what it will help, because I've done this quite extensively myself. How do you get invited into a game? And I don't know if any of you have done online dating, but the experience is not very different. You're, instead of trying to find a significant other, you're trying to find a group of friends, right? And you're trying to find a good match. So almost all of the tools and tips for online dating happen to apply pretty directly translate to finding a group on Roll20, which is make sure your profile is filled out. Make sure that you do a good job of representing yourself. Take a second to edit your forum post to make sure that you're speaking clearly about what you want. And then also read the game's listing pretty clearly. You want to make sure that if the GM had a certain requirements, like he wanted a character concept right from the beginning, or they want to make sure that you confirm something in your post, make sure that you do that, because a lot of GMs do this, and oftentimes you're getting disqualified for something that you didn't even recognize that you were doing wrong in your request to join the game. It's also, I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks people have is they only apply to one game. And if you do that one game at a time, and that might be what you prefer because you only have a particular night of the week you can do, but I found that if you apply to half a dozen games, any of one of which you'd like, you're far more likely to find a game quickly within a week or so of starting to apply for games than if you just apply for one at a time and wait, for 2 or 3 weeks for that entire process to go through for the GM to pick his favorite candidates. So you're going to have a lot more success if you really put yourself out there, you read what the GM is asking for, and you present yourself well. All right, so now we're going to jump to all of the tools that we think are useful that aren't actually in the Roll20 virtual tabletop itself. Roll20 provides a whole bunch of external tools that we think can be really useful to you. And one of the ones that I personally am most excited about is the Compendium. And the Compendium is this basically the rule set for popular role-playing games that have open gaming licenses that Roll20 has been able to import into our servers and being able to connect them directly to the virtual tabletop. Currently, the only 2 systems that we have in right now are for 3.5 and 5th edition. So hopefully we can get more open license games and people who are fans of those games contributing and curating these systems, because I'd love to see pretty much every open gaming license system here connected, so that way from inside the game you can just directly reference rules, and we now have the ability for our character sheet authors directly tie the ability to import rule mechanics like a spell or a weapon or a magic item directly from the compendium onto the character sheet and import it directly, which we've done with the 5th edition sheet, and I think is coming with Pathfinder. So I think that's a super cool tool. I'm really excited about it. It's mostly for the GM, though I think it's really useful for heavier games for players who are like a spellcasting class and have a lot of those, there's 20 different details on every spell for each time you have to import them. But for GMs, I know for me personally, it's been a lifesaver where I plan an encounter or something like that, and I know that I need 3 goblins and 4 kobolds and a red dragon. I would never do that, but if I were prepping that battle, it's as simple as just clicking and dragging them onto the tabletop, and it's a huge lifesaver in the way that allows me to prep the game and like the story and not have to focus so much on all of the mechanical details and that kind of time consuming prep that for me kind of strangles some of the joy out of running the game. So Aaron, do you have anything you want to share about the compendium?
Yeah, so you mentioned about weapons and spells, but just wanted to highlight that you also have the ability to drag in a lot of monsters that are in there and set up the characters for those, which can be a huge time saver for GM setting up monster battles, etc. Yeah, just personally, we have used the 5th edition SRD extensively in the 2 games that I'm currently in, both players and the GM.
Yeah.
Really great.
So if you're interested in helping to contribute to either the 5th edition Pathfinder or any other open source game, you can drop an email to team@roll20.net, and our community manager, Stephanie, would be happy to start getting people to help as the rules change. I know recently the 5e SRD recently had an update to it, and those are the types of changes that we can get done much more quickly if our community members help us out and get those changes in quickly, because we want them in as quickly as you do, because we're all playing these same games too. So with all of us working together, we tend to end up with even more amazing products. So the next tool that I want to talk about is one that I use on a daily basis. I've been a Power user for since 2012, since the product came out. I use it every single day as a developer, and there's no way you can remember all of the technical details of how Roll20 works, which is why our Wikipedia is so important. We take a lot of time to try and detail all of our tools, how they work, how to reference them, all kinds of little details. So a lot of everything I'm going to be talking about today is stuff that's already in the Wikipedia that you could find yourself, but might not be so easy to just read through and dig it up. I seriously, I reference this document absolutely daily. The dice reference in particular is something I'm in there constantly, and it doesn't matter how many times I set up macros, I still get things ever slightly wrong in the syntax. And there's examples in there that will show you this is exactly how the roll should look and how it works. I know Aaron probably has pretty strong feelings about the API part of the wiki. As that's something that he's worked on himself.
Yeah, and it's the nice thing about the wiki is we have a lot of people in the community that come and help add new features or add examples. In the API especially, we have a whole section of cookbook stuff where people who write API scripts have come in and written small functions to do little tasks. I have a couple out there for managing status markers and things of that nature. And so it's a great place to sort of share small bits of knowledge, and it's nice. You can feel kind of empowered as part of the community to go out there and make corrections or improve sort of the instructions on something that's maybe a little bit terse. Yeah.
And when you don't find what you're looking for on the wiki, that's not the end of the resources. I actually think that even more than the wiki, probably my favorite resource for Roll20 is its community. Like, we have an awesome community. You guys are amazing. You're pretty much the friendliest, nicest corner of the internet I've ever come across, which can be a dark and scary place. I think our moderators do a bang-up job of keeping that a positive, friendly, and on topic kind of a place. And we have a bunch of different forum categories for talking about everything from character sheets, the API, general questions, general Roll20 conversations, and
the Roll20 convention.
Yeah, the Roll20 convention, exactly. So if you have a question or concern, you can't figure something out, go there, and I promise you within 24 hours, you will have scores of friendly Roll20 rollers coming out in mass to help you figure out your problem. I know Phil also has strong feelings about the bug reports forum because he's the guy who's manning that currently. He took that over for me, but he's in there daily to help you guys with technical issues. If you think there's something not working about the site like it should, or something didn't work in the last update, or introduce something that we haven't caught, we try and get that turned around as quickly as possible. So those are like the general kind of information tools. Like from the compendium, you can get rule mechanics, and from our wiki and our forums, you can get help and information and talk about it. And we're going to talk for a few minutes now about other tools that are built into Roll20 that aren't information based, but like kind of mechanical things. And one of the ones that is offered to our subscribing members is the Character Vault. And I know I've made use of it, but I know Aaron has probably used it more than just about anyone I know. So do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so the Character Vault, I think, is probably an unsung hero as far as features of Roll20, and I use it all the time, especially as a player, and not just for characters, and that's sort of, I think, maybe the secret. So obviously you can use it to set up your own character and bring it to someone's game, or if you have a character you want to import to another campaign for some other reason. For example, I've used it to import NPCs into one of my wife's games before. But you can also use it for things like spell templates, and I think it really shines for that. So I have a whole game set up with just a bunch of 5th edition spells, and before the compendium, I also have the details of the spell in the character, so you could drag that in. I have it set up so all players can access it, so anyone, now that we can drag in as players, drag in characters, anyone can drag in the spell they're casting and align it, and they have a quick reference for the spell details. Which is not as necessary now, but was great then. So yeah, I think it's great. It's also a nice way to archive your character if you want to keep a copy of your character at various levels, so you could go back and maybe see how you'd level them again in other games.
For sure, and just so you're aware of the mechanics of that, the game master of whatever game you're trying to import the character to needs to set the game as being compatible to do that. You can't just import any character into any game. The GM has to set it as a setting in the game to grant permission for his players to bring in their own characters. And usually I see with advanced groups of Roll20 users, most of them have created their characters in their own games. In preparation for the setting, and then the GM just flips the switch and they bring in their character sheet to the table and basically attach it to that game. And then one of my personal favorites part of Roll20 is just that it keeps all of the paperwork of the game tightly contained in one spot. Then you don't have to worry about anyone losing their character sheet or erasing holes through it or anything at that point, because certainly before the character sheet function, almost all of the players still had physical character sheets in their hands, and as often as not, somebody would lose theirs. So Character Vault's is a pretty awesome thing. So in the same vein as the Character Vault, for our pro subscribers, we have the Transmogrifier, which is something you can do from inside your game. And what it allows you to do is to transfer all manner of high-level elements, including characters, but also pages and tracks and
custom decks of cards,
custom decks of cards.
Yeah, it's really great for that.
Yeah, so I ran a Deadlands game for quite a while and ran several seasons of it. And one of the things I did is I uploaded a Deadlands art graphic card set and a card deck, but was actually a pot of chips, of poker chips to deal out. And so the Transmogrifier allowed me to take, instead of having to re-upload that each card, I could just move it from game to game as I needed it. And it's a pretty deck of cards, and it's a cool pot of chips. So if I needed tokens or a card deck for any of my other games, I had them prepped and could move them.
Another great thing is that you can use it to clone maps you've already created in a particular game. So if you need to make a night version of some day temple or whatever that you've created, you can move that or take a copy of it to some outside game, change the name locally, and then pull it back, and you get a fresh copy, which you can go ahead and tweak. And that's kind of like another thing I do with the Transmogrifier very often is I have a game that just is 5th edition monsters, and every time I set up a monster, I copy a version of it over to that Transmogrifier, and then when I create a new 5th edition game, I can go ahead and pull in, a dragon or a couple orcs or whatever else.
Very cool. Yeah, and in my lazier moments of DMing, I have stolen entire encounters wholesale from previous games that I've run because I just didn't have the time to prep one as completely as I should. So I would be lazy and I'd cheat and steal. You know what? That goblin raid from that game that I ran two games ago would be perfect right here, and it allows you to just jump it over. And then also something available to our pro users is custom character sheets. And while it requires a little bit of coding know-how, certainly to make a sheet, there are even sheets out there that people have just shared that for whatever reason haven't made it onto our character sheet repository and aren't from the drop-down list, or people have made variations or hacks of popular sheets. It allows you to do whatever character sheet with whatever functionality you want to. And with our sheet workers that are now available and role templates that are now available in our character sheets, it's basically the gateway to creating any module you want to run in Roll20 that could handle any system you could think of. So I think it's an incredibly powerful tool that if you are interested in bringing in a game that the Roll20 community hasn't already created, that's an amazing place to begin. Have you worked with custom character sheets at all, Aaron?
I've written a library called the Aaron Sheet that provides some wrappers around dealing with sort of the repeating sections functionality for doing summations and running totals and things of that nature. I have high hopes to write some character sheets, but haven't gotten around to it with so many other things to do. Yeah. But I've helped a few people. I actually worked on the community 5th edition sheet before October took it over, just a little bit at the very beginning. The nice thing about custom character sheets too is you can grab a character sheet out of the current repo and modify it for your homebrew. Some people like to use like extra stats like integrity and honor and such, and maybe sanity. So you could add those stats into, say, the 5th edition character sheet, and you have your own little version.
And again, it's actually surprisingly easy to do like little hacks like that. It is in HTML and CSS, but that is kind of ubiquitous on the web, so a lot of people can understand those basic concepts enough to just copy and paste a section and change a name, and then you're pretty much ready to roll.
Yeah, even if you just want to add a little flair to your campaign by changing out the background or some of the colors, it can be a nice way to get that immersion that you want.
Very much so. So the last kind of external tools that I wanted to talk about are another question that we get quite a bit, which is the difference between the Roll20 app on Android and for Apple versus the table for tablet support that comes with our subscription. And the first one, the app on your tablets is completely free. You don't have to pay for it. It's available right now in your Apple Store. Or your app store. You just go in there and you download it, and it has a different focus than the table for tablet, which is also on the tablet, but kind of serves a different purpose. And what the app does is it's meant to facilitate in-person play. I use it for all of my in-person games, and sometimes even for my online games, I'll have a character sheet set up on my tablet, because that's mostly what it does, is the character sheet and turn tracker, without any of the map or the virtual tabletop itself, because it's expecting you to be handling that in some other way. But for my in-person games, I like to throw Roll20 up on my big screen TV, and everyone has their tablets with them with their character sheets, and they're doing all the rollings from the tablets, and it's popping up on the TV, where I, as the GM, have the full version of the app on a laptop, and I'm playing from there. So whenever I'm even when I'm playing in person, I'm finding a lot of use for the Roll20 tools, the ability to keep all of my paperwork for the game in one place, and also being able to kind of do a cool graphical interface using the dynamic lighting, some of the other tools, even when I'm playing in person. Whereas the table for tablet that comes with the subscription is the full, the entire Roll20 interface. Everything that you can do in the app on your computer, you can do from the tablet. And for the vast majority of people are probably playing this on iPads or larger Google tablets, and they work very well, but I find personally clicking around goes a little bit slower, so I like to pair a Bluetooth mouse to the tablet even when I'm working that way, because there's a lot of functionality for me as a power user for Roll20 for the context, the right-clicking menu that I like to make use around the tablet that's sometimes harder with like the 2-finger touch. But it's either way, it's still a really cool product that has saved my butt while I've been traveling where I was supposed to run a game, and I was able to do it from my iPad. So it's a pretty cool product. I think they're both really neat. They're just meant to do different things. You get them in slightly different ways, and because they're both on the tablet, there's a lot of confusion. Do either of you have any experience using those?
So I use the mobile support on my phone sometimes to jump in and look something up when I'm having a conversation with someone about some character in the battle last night. How'd that work with that spell? I can jump in there and see, I had these couple things prepared or whatever. So that's kind of handy. Or if I want to scroll back through the chat and I don't have to go into the external journal, then I can go look there and such. I've not used it on the use the native app before.
Right.
Do you have a dice roller, the native app?
It does.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, it can do. I think the benefit of it, with as advanced as the character sheets are, is you can do all the roll buttons and all of the macros from the character sheet, which for most people, they have everything set up by the time of the game anyways. But you can roll everything from the chat pane that you could from inside the app. All right, so that's all of the dressing for Roll20. Now we're going to jump into the actual app itself and talk about what tools we think are being underused in the app itself. And my personal one that I feel the strongest about, because it's not on by default, and I always expect it to be on, is the advanced keyboard shortcuts. I think they're incredibly useful if you want to be a power user of Roll20. From the GM's point of view, being able to switch between layers at the push of a single button, moving tokens in between layers with 2 touches, just pushing 2 keys, popping open the page menu, moving between pages. It speeds up your ability to be a director of the game, so that way what's graphically represented matches with what you're also narrating around it. It's like a level of professionality to your game mastering and your storytelling that it just cuts off so many seconds of that clumsy moment where you're talking about it and then you stop and there's 4 or 5 seconds of where you got to select the token and then you got to click to move the layer. So I would strongly suggest checking out the advanced keyboard shortcuts. There are probably 20 of them at this point that we've added. There's a lot of functionality there, and I use it all the time, every game.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. So the editor I spend most of my time in is called VI, and for it, every single character on your keyboard does a different function. It's a moded editor, so that's very interesting. So I'm very used to hitting a single key and having a single response. And until we get Jackson to our next for the computer, I don't think there's any greater integration than just sort of getting those keys to be very natural, where I don't even think about what key it is I'm hitting. I'm just like, oh, I need to measure, and my finger moves, and now I'm on the measuring tool, and then it's, oh, I need to select this thing, and it's back. And yeah, I think that's like a #1 way to elevate your use level on Roll20.
So the next piece of functionality I want to talk about is something that is probably the most useful in a chat or text-based game, but I use it all the time, even in my video games, because it's incredibly useful in highlighting what's going on and linking things quickly, images that you can't directly bring in, maybe music or videos to your game that you want your players to check out or you want your friends to check out. Often as not, I use it to put in silly pictures to make everyone laugh. But there's a markdown text editing in the chat pane. And what you can do is put stars on either side of a word and italicize or double stars to bold. And there's also syntax to directly do a hyperlink from your chat to an object, or if you do it to an item, it will load the image directly in the chat pane. So, you know, in the game that I was playing in last night, somebody made a "just do it" joke. So Shia LaBeouf made a graphical journey into our game, go and just do it a whole bunch of times, which got a lot of laughs out of us. I think it's a pretty useful tool that most people wouldn't ever stumble across in knowing that it's there. And I probably end up using it at least once a game, if not more.
Yeah, it's a great way to set the mood by putting in, you know, the right image of. So like in our game Thursday night, we were entering. We're playing the horror. Was the one after Horde of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat, and so we're going into that temple that's built into the side of this cliff. And so the GM pulled up a picture of that ancient temple from that was featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and popped that in the chat so we could see it. So that's a great way of like setting the mood and giving you an idea of what's going on. And then when our cleric of war shot himself in the foot for the third time, you know, we pulled the appropriate animated GIF to make fun of him and post that into the chat in a very friendly and non-bullying way.
So the great part about this particular tool is it's different than dropping and dragging an image directly on the main virtual tabletop, which is there. It usually tends to pop up pretty big and it's eye-catching. This is a slightly subtler way of doing it. That also the players can contribute to, because normally they don't have access directly to the VTT. So it's a way for the players to like add their own little flair to things that they want to do.
Before this was introduced too, it was one of the most often requested simple scripts on the API forum was, hey, how can I just make a picture show up in chat?
Right. So I think that's a super useful tool. I use it all the time. Almost as much as I use the next tool we're going to talk about, which is 3D dice. I'm always surprised about how few people don't know that we have this. It's one of my favorite tools. It's something I've worked on a lot myself. And the dice, there's something about rolling dice that is intrinsic to the tabletop experience for me, of where I have my character's fate in my own hands, you know, where I pick up a handful of dice and I scatter them across the table. And so with 3D dice now, you have built into it dice agency. You can pick up the dice, you can pick a point and throw them as hard or soft as you want to. You get to roll the dice and watch as your, you know, 13 pivots to a 20 and you get the critical hit. It adds something. For some people don't like it because it slows down the game a little bit. You actually have to roll the dice, right? Instead of just pushing a button in it, the chat tells you what the result was. There's actually some dice rolling. I personally prefer it. But there is a way to kind of speed it up a little bit. There's a way to auto roll if you don't want the dice agency, but you still want the graphical, you know, the seeing the dice tumble and bounce into each other. There's in the settings menu, there's a way of turning on auto rolling. So as soon as you click the button or you put in the roll command, it'll just spit out the dice onto the table without prompting you to pick them up and throw them yourself. So do you mostly play with dice, 3D dice on or off, Aaron?
I mostly play with them off, honestly. I'm on the speed side of things. I want to see those numbers flash up the chat as fast as possible. And I tend to also output every possible number in one go, and so that would kind of get a little crazy.
That is true when you're rolling the attack, the possible crit, the crit confirm, the damage, the critical damage, all at the same time. That's a lot of dice to go spiraling across.
If you're playing a fighter that in 5th edition that has what are those extra points that lets them do extra things, and you throw those on there as well, and you know I might have like 4 or 5 extra things. I might have bless on there, or you know, all that sort of stuff. And so you can end up with a lot of rolls, and so I think they're really cool though.
Yeah. So that's actually one of the things I tried to tackle with the OGL 5th edition character sheet, where I set the default because I like the 3D dice and I kind of want to encourage other people to use them, is the idea of where you roll first to attack. And then whether you hit or not, there's the option to roll directly from the chat pane the damage. So that way you're not rolling dice unless the previous conditions have been met, and you can roll piecemeal the 3D dice as you need them. I think it creates a more pure translation of what you would do in an in-person game, depending on how important that is to your group. But again, the great thing about all of these things being optional is you don't have to use them if it's not right for your group. If you're aiming for speed, you're playing Pathfinder, there's a lot of rolls, a lot of crunch that you want to get through. Maybe it's better for your group to have this off.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point with the making later rolls. I have on a recent character implemented his expertise dice in such a way that it has one of those things that's like an API button. What do you call the ones with the tilde? You have a name for those? I can't remember.
For
so the API buttons that aren't for the API, they're for calling something out on a character.
Yeah, no, I don't know if we named them. Maybe character sheet buttons.
Just call them the not API buttons. I use the not
API buttons
to go ahead and dump out a possible roll to hit for for whatever parry or such.
For sure. So yeah, there's a lot of cool functionality that came out of that last character sheet update in order to kind of make the game feel more like an in-person tabletop experience.
It's silver. I see it all over it in the chat. Ability command buttons.
Ability command buttons. All right, there you go.
Perfect.
And speaking of abilities, we're going to jump into probably the other in-app thing that gets brought up the most. Probably the number one set of questions on the forums are all related to macros. Macros. It requires syntax, which kind of feels like you're a coder in order to set them up. And a lot of the more complex games, which happen to be some of the more popular games, have a lot of math behind them, right? So being able to set up these macros creates an incredible speed up, like Aaron was talking about, to the run of the game. Like if you could have all these numbers spit out at the same time, you can at a glance know exactly what your attack happened. So that way you can go attack, rather than trying to calculate, did I hit, did I miss, what's going on. And so could you talk, Aaron, a little bit about what's the difference between a macro, an ability, and then a token action?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So a macro is it's for the player only. You go in and set up your own macros. You personally can't share those macros. The GM has a way for them to show up, but they are not tied to any specific character. They're just generally speaking a way of grouping together a bunch of chat output that you would like to see and be able to do over and over again. So you could use them just for, say, emoting something. Like I have a character who has this very sort of dark background and a lot of metaphor around always walking up steps, always more steps. So he was always saying things about steps, always more steps whenever something would happen. And so I have a macro for that, and I just hit it when it was appropriate. He was also a priest, so he had a particular sequence, a sort of a ritual he did for dead intelligent humanoids, and I had that as a macro. So I'd smack that thing whenever it was after the battle, and he's doing his various different rituals and such. And so it could be that, or it could be something like, say, whispering to a particular person. I've had games where there was a lot of intrigue going on, so you needed to talk to this guy but not that one, and so I had buttons for all the players, and I just smack it. It would prompt me for a message, and I'd hack them out and send them off. So that's kind of nice. So just sort of a shortcut way of providing a series of commands you would otherwise be typing in chat. Versus abilities, which are tied to a specific character. And of course, you can basically get the same functionality in both of those systems, but with the abilities, you have the added advantage that the current character is in context. So if you say dexterity, it knows you mean the dexterity for the current character. You don't have to say, Bob pipe dexterity or something. So that can be really nice, especially because then if you have a lot of characters that are similar, so say you have two characters that are fighters and they both have second wind, and you want to have a particular output from that, well, you can just copy the same set of information from one ability to the ability on another character, and you don't have to worry about changing character names or anything. It just works for them. Or if you copy a character, then it just works. Versus with the macro, you'd have to have one separate macro for each character, or you'd have to depend on which character is currently selected, or which token for which character. Both of those have the ability to show up whenever you have selected a character. It's mostly useful for abilities. You can check on for an ability that they are a token action. So then you get a little menu at the top left that shows a button for each of your token abilities, token actions, and clicking it will run that action. And that's really nice because you can also, at that point, depend on the fact that you have that character, that token selected. So it's really great for ensuring you have a selected token to run an API command where you need to pass something about the selected token, or you need to verify that this player can use this token because they've got it selected, that kind of thing. Macros, you can also tell them to show up as a token action, and they show up for everyone. And you might use that for something where you're using @selected, maybe a particular emote, like if you wanted someone to always be able to say, medic or whatever, call medic, have a button for that, it could use selected token's name so that it could always pipe out that particular help, I need a medic, and it would tell you who needed the medic without having to actually set up that ability on everyone.
Yeah, and another great part of setting something as an ability rather than a global macro, not only is it kind of more tied directly to the character, in context, like you said, but it also moves with the character if you're moving it from game to game using the character transfer tools like the transmogrifier or the character vault. So that way you can have a whole bunch of custom cool flavor stuff that you've set up on your character, or stuff to expedite gameplay, and you don't have to re-input that in order to take it with you from game to game.
Definitely.
And then token actions work with both macros, global macros, and abilities, but one is tied directly to the character, so it's only if you're clicking on a token that represents that character will it appear, compared to global ones that are going to appear all the time. So there is also some one of the things that gets brought up kind of a lot about that is those two tend to not play nice with each other as far as alphabetizing them. And that's something that we're looking into. It's kind of low on our priority list because it doesn't stop you from using them. It just isn't in the order that you'd probably like. That's a question we get all the time. It's something that we know you guys want us to fix, and it's something that we'll get to here eventually. So I know something that you wanted to talk about, Aaron, was the pitfalls that kind of come along with being having a game with multiple game masters in it. But just
I don't know about pitfalls, but
sure. Or advantages and pitfalls.
Advantages. I think it's mostly advantages, but I'll breeze through real fast because I know we've only got about 5 minutes left. But so co-GMs, I think, is a really great and powerful feature and can be really helpful, especially to new GMs starting off. So I wrote a whole list of stuff out. But so it's a great way to subdivide tasks. If maybe you don't feel comfortable running all the mechanics of a game, you're not used to it yet. Maybe you've never played Fate, but someone else has, but you want to tell a story and you want to use that as your setting. You could invite a friend of yours that's played Fate a lot to be a co-GM in your campaign or in your game, and they could handle some of the mechanics, answer questions, and you can tell your story. Even if you're just, say, playing 5th edition and you feel overwhelmed by how many things are going on, having someone else that can, maybe run some of the lesser NPCs or manage the rank and file troops during combat can be really handy and can get you really motivated and allow you to tell more of the story you want to tell while someone else is assisting you with sort of the small details. It's also a great way of pulling in people for specialized help. I probably have joined hundreds of games just to jump in and help diagnose problems with API scripts, or maybe set up certain features someone's not very comfortable with, like, say, rollable table tokens, and just assist in general. It can also be a great way to shore up certain disabilities. I have a really good friend that's nearly blind, and so I've joined his game as a co-GM, run sort of the visual aspects and direct characters around while he's telling a story and just sort of dictating what's going on. So it lets him still do the game mastering online, while someone else is dealing with the other details. It's also a wonderful way of setting up temporary privileges. I've been in, Steven Shomo had a game I was in one time, and he started the game off by just making everyone a co-GM. They went in, set up their characters, and then once everything's set up, he revoked their co-GM status, so they could then set up their token how they liked it and create additional ones if they need additional characters, if they needed familiars or things of that nature. So,
All right.
One last thing really great about co-GMs is if you have a long-running campaign with a bunch of friends and you'd like to step down from GMing and play with all your other friends in the same setting, you can promote one of your players to a GM, and then you can rejoin as just a player and still, hang around in the same setting with all your same things. So that can be really great.
Great. So we hope you've enjoyed our panel today, that we've been going through what we think are the coolest and most useful tools that you might not have heard about yet. And we're, looking forward to the rest of the day. Coming up right after this panel is a pretty exciting game of Dungeons & Dragons run by James with Chris Perkins, the designer of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, along with Holly Conrad, Anna Proser, our host for this event, and Pro Jared. So also, to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion, I am going to be running a community game for you guys, any of our fans who want to join us. I'm going to be running a slasher horror game where you guys are trapped on a mysterious island. And I would encourage anybody who would like to play to join me. I'm going to be starting it in about an hour. So I'll post the link in chat, and hopefully you all come play with me.
And that is a creepy, creepy game, too. Nolan just barely got me.
Yeah, yes, he did. So thank you all for joining us.